right. Your presenters today, we are a larger team of presenters, I think, for the conference. We're our cross-functional group with representation from academic affairs, EOS student affairs, our institutional data strategy and university technology office. And in the last year, we have been participating as a group in the Future of Privacy Forum's Train the Trainer program, which really has solidified the idea for us that privacy of data is everybody's responsibility at the institution. And so we're really excited to have this conversation with a broader community of our ASU colleagues around this particular topic and how we might be able to bring some of the things that we learned to the culture of ASU. So what we have planned for our time together is to just kind of level set in terms of definitions. What do we mean when we're talking about student privacy in terms of data? Our understanding of the context around that and the current state at ASU. And again, this is our perspectives on these things. And we are really looking to facilitate a conversation to understand what the broader community's perspective is around these topics. And then we'll have two activities that we look forward to having some engagement with you all on. The first one will be just kind of checking in on your barometer around privacy of your data, and then kind of see what is your understanding in terms of students' attitudes towards privacy in their data. And then we'll do some future visioning activities together, again, being true to the metaphor of the conference. We'll talk a little bit about that menu and what is the daily soup selection for us. So with that, I'll hand it over to Alecia.
Great. So as Lisa was saying, we've spent the last few months trying to understand privacy and data privacy and all the things that means. And I don't necessarily have any greater clarity on like a one sentence definition now than I did then after reading loads of articles and watching loads of videos and doing loads of activities. But I feel like I intuitively kind of know what it is in my heart somewhere. And so hopefully as an institution, we can continue to sort of build upon that language. But if I've learned anything, is that I do feel like it is a combination between ethics, rights, law, risk, security, and trust. And the International Association of Privacy Professionals describe it broadly, privacy, as the right to be let alone or freedom from interference or intrusion. And so that language, I think, really speaks to, I think, why it's important to think about privacy. For the duration of this meeting today, I'd like all of us just to think in the back of our mind of some key questions about data privacy and privacy in particular, which is where and how do we collect and use data? How should we use and collect data? And in that, really, what are our data ethics? What are expectations of others, aka our students, on how we collect and use their data? And then with that, do people even have the appropriate literacy to understand or communicate their privacy preferences and concerns? And then finally, what's at risk if we don't improve our governance of data? And so between those key questions, between those, I think, 6 different words and the understanding that this is a freedom from interference or intrusion, I hope that gives a little bit more of a sense about what privacy is. One thing that I do think it's important to point out is the difference between data privacy and information security. And they are linked together, but they are not inclusive definitions of both of each other. So International Association of Privacy Professionals once again states that data privacy is focused on the use and governance of personal data. Things like putting policies in place to ensure that consumers' personal information is being collected, shared, or used in appropriate ways. Security, however, focuses more on protecting data from malicious attacks and the exploitation of stolen data for profit. So while security is necessary for protecting data, it is not sufficient for addressing privacy alone. So in today's conversation, you're going to hear a lot of thoughts about governance and use. And in addition to that, some things as it relates to security. And so they're related and they're attached, but it's there's a lot more to data privacy than just information security.
Yeah, so thanks everybody. If there's a little background noise, it's because I had to roam around to find good natural light in my office minutes. So apologies at the beginning. But so when we think about privacy in the world, this is such an interesting topic because it is something that I think we can all associate and relate to. Just as people that are out in the world, there's people that are on this Zoom call right now. And then I think going from that position, we can drill down then into, what are our roles? What are the roles of our constituents here in our place of work? So privacy in the world in the past 10 years has become additionally complicated. Largely there are many reasons, right? So there's sort of the advancement of marketing technologies, right, that give us the sense of surveillance in our digital space, but also sort of leaking into our physical spaces, right? We imagine the Alexas and the Google Dots listening to us. But also, there's this proliferation of IoT devices, so the Internet of Everything, right? So we're getting to a place where there is sort of, I think, a traditional sense of legal privacy. Then we move into this sense of technical privacy and the technical privacy issues. But then we're quickly going to be moving into a space where the amount of data and sort of the proliferation of data sort of, again, expands. So how do we bring privacy to, say, our device data? What is the privacy setting of our device data? What's the privacy setting of the Nest camera that's sitting on your driveway? And what does that equal when we multiply those by like millions and millions of devices? Let's go ahead and move to the next one. And of course, we are very familiar with these things that can ring very true to home, right? So Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, that feels like that was 2 decades ago, but in reality, what was that, 2018? A huge deal. We have our sort of traditional like leaks, you know what I mean? So the release of data, release of data around MySpace recently happened. That was very funny. But then, so we have these sort of leak opportunities, right? We have the risks that we place by just simply holding on to data or even requesting data in the first place, right? And then we sort of bump up against a lot of these ethical issues, right? So what is the ethical use of data that is collected for one purpose and then exploited for another purpose? But I really love this. So everybody can check out this EDUCAUSE article down here at the bottom. Not sure if they're invading my privacy or just really interested in me. Because I think that is often the question that we have to answer, right? I mean, this is the line that everybody is walking with their privacy, of exchanging their, their sense of privacy for conveniences, for opportunities, for just having someone be really, really interested in us. So this is sort of the larger frame that we're operating in, and we can kind of drill down constituent wise from there.
So I love that Kate had the not sure if they're invading my privacy bit, because I think that speaks to higher education quite a bit. So just a little bit of a landscape on how we think about privacy in higher education. Is that a university, and in particular, I think ASU is actually just a small city. And so it's very large, and we collect data, and we collect a lot of it. And sometimes we collect the information intentionally and unintentionally. And so there's a lot out there, and it can be on, I think, anything under the sun, right? So we have our academics, which we know about, but we have things like service usage. So how are people, how many times a day is someone using the Sentinel Fitness and Wellness Center, as an example, using their fitness centers? Transactions and behaviors. Most institutions can figure out what time people are getting lunch using their meal plan, and all of that, and other sorts of behaviors. We know location movement, so we know not only where do they live, but depending on which higher education institution you're at, you might have Wi-Fi data, and you might have protections around that, you might not. You might have, with that, also movement data. So not only where you're at, but where have you come from. You have other information like finances. You have feelings information, which can come across through survey information, written work, or anything really you can be able to extract feelings out of. And then if a higher education institution has a covered entity under it, it can have a health center with students' health data as well. So a small city with loads and loads of data, and that data can be stored in either siloed places or in central places. And so there's a lot out there for how that information gets stored and used and distributed. And so the management of this information is going to necessarily involve sort of institutional management, legal management, right? So we have things like HIPAA, but that can't be enough. And then cultural management. So as Lisa mentioned earlier, data privacy, since it involves the use of things, really has to be distributed in a culture thinking about data privacy. And so that might exist in some higher educations. It might not. It might exist in one office, the technology office, or it might not exist at all. But it matters quite a bit because students, our main constituent, 1 in 4 of them say that they think that they benefit from their institution's collection and use of their personal data. And so do they know enough to be able to have an opinion on that? Is there ways that we could communicate better? Should we have better policies and procedures? And so that's something we need to think about across the board for higher education. And then one other thing, adding a level of complexity, is that higher education institutions serve a very diverse community. You have students who are traditional students who might be, 18 years old right out of high school with similar sets of experiences. You might also have students who are, 63 coming back to the institution who grew up in a different kind of community. You also have staff and faculty with different orientations to information and data. You have digital natives, and then at the very least, we have people who are going to be training to be future data privacy professionals as an educational institution. And so what that means, I think, is that privacy in higher education can feel very complicated. And so this was an activity the 4 of us did, which we were trying to, do a Venn diagram to understand how all of these things intersect, specifically in the higher education space and ASU, and perhaps in particular. The 4 to the right are our best attempts when we try to individually. And like 1, you see this like chaotic bubble of overlapping circles, which is, I think speaks to me on like an emotional level going through this process. We have others that are more process oriented, but we're trying to grapple with all the complexities here. And what you see on the right is kind of where we landed, but I don't think there's agreement either. So there's a lot to think about as it relates to data privacy in higher education, touching upon any of these bubbles.
Thanks, Alicia. I love the Venn diagram game. Like I could play that for hours. And we may roll that out. Maybe the next data conference we'll do that at Slice, right, Mike? So privacy at ASU, I'm going to fly through a couple slides here, but really what I want to say and what I want you to hear us saying today is that we consider this a space that needs a lot of work and attention at both the top level and at the grassroots level. So we know that key aspects are the bread and butter of some of your areas. I see Jen Tweedy here, I see Mike, Josh. We know that there's a lot of work that's already gone into this. We also believe, and I think believe more firmly based on the training we've gone through, that there is work to be done, particularly in impacting our culture. So I did a quick, what are all the different things that we say about privacy kind of into the world? And I came up with this list pretty quickly, right? There's a lot of front-facing information. For myself as a professional in the data space at ASU, I also know that these policies do not answer all the questions. Like we're still constantly grappling with appropriate use questions. And for the right reasons, right? Because this is not a simple landscape. The stakeholders, kind of the people, and if you went to my session yesterday, I talked about data decisions come out, data-informed decisions come out of a space that combines kind of people and context. And so I thought I'd just touch on this. This isn't comprehensive, certainly not even in terms of those stakeholders. But I do think our political context, regulatory context, the evolution of the conversation about analytics and the use of data, that last headline Kate had on her world slide, right? Like people are kind of in a somewhat ambivalent space right now as a whole, right? Individuals may have strong opinions, but as a whole, we are learning as we go. So a couple things that I'm going to highlight. My partner's a historian. I'm sure he would find this a completely inappropriate way to cast the history because I just kind of picked the things I knew happened. But the investment in Colibra was a big step forward. And I see Josh on the call here as the current lead on that technology. I think this is an important piece of our evolution in governance and transparency around our use of data. We have initiated conversations in the provost office under the Student Success Analytic Collaborative, and specifically engaged with the Future of Privacy Forum a couple of years ago, which led to this Train the Trainer engagement. Donna, I won't pretend to know everything that Donna's up to at all. A couple of you work for her, you could probably say a lot more. But the fact that digital trust is a part of her title, I know is significant to her, and I think is a significant marker for the importance of digital trust, which if you saw on the Venn diagram, that does have a lot of overlap with the privacy concerns in our opinion. Jen, I see Jennifer Tweedy is on here and is hiring a privacy manager. I got to be a part of an interview process for that. And I think that also sets a really important milestone in our evolution as an institution. And then last thing I'm going to say, and then we'll get into our exercise. The work will continue, right? Everything on this slide is forward-looking statements and tiny footnoted, who knows, right? Like who knows what will happen. We want this to be an evolution, and we want to eventually end up in a place where we can make really strong and bold claims about the way that ASU does privacy. All right, activity 1.
All right, we are going to open up breakout rooms, and you should get assigned to one automatically, and we'll give you instructions once we get there. All right, we're going to do an activity using Mural. So I'm going to put, Mural. We are group 4. So on the Mural, it should take you to a view that has yellowish orange Post-it notes. Enter as a guest. Don't try to set up an account or log in. So we're collaboratively going to categorize as a group these different types of data about ourselves in terms of what our preferences are in terms of whether or not data is collected and stored at all. It's collected and stored, but I can't control my sharing preferences. Collected and stored, but remains private to me as a company. Collected and stored, and I choose to see the information, and then collected and stored and stored. So feel free to go in and kind of move things around within our yellow, orange Post-its, and we can debate if anyone moves something into an area that we don't agree with. Any questions about the activity?
Lisa, can you remind me how to zoom in on the mural?
If you are you on a laptop? If it's a laptop mouse, I think kind of opening what you would have done just scrolling on a mouse.
Jen Tweedy is actually sitting at a different desk, but across from me, and just gave me the pro tip about looking in the lower right-hand corner.
Oh.
So.
There's a low bar for pro tip, apparently. I'm going to get my badge for that right away.
All these collaboration problems are just a little bit different, and it is very disorienting when they don't work as you would expect them to.
With some of these, I'm struggling with what my personal feelings about them are versus what I know we do as a university with some of these.
Yes, yeah. Or what we know businesses already do. Like
Exactly. Exactly.
I was struggling with the mute. Sorry, I second that, Elizabeth. And I'm in my mind, like designing what I want our privacy for all approach to be. like this should not be associated with this category, but it is.
One of the things that just totally boggles my mind is Venmo as like a social media platform. Like if the fact that there's even the option for a feed, I just don't understand.
Same. I mark all my transactions as private, even though they're like $10 to my friend for buying me ice cream or, whatever. I don't know. There's something that feels weird about it. I totally agree, Bethany.
Weird. And like, I don't care that my sister-in-law bought Starbucks for her teen. Like, I'm missing something.
We got to remember we're coming out of a phase where everybody in quotes, was sharing their geolocations on, just blasting all their social networks with the same geolocation for every single transaction. So I hope
You can see how they got there. Like,
totally. Yeah. As boring as that is, I think we're still riding that wave.
I think did anyone move education history, or is it sitting there because that's where it started? I'm just kind of curious, but it's almost totally public if someone moved it there.
Did you say education history?
Yeah.
Lisa?
That might have been where it started, but I don't know if it moved it.
All right, we're back. Hope you had some good discussions there. We're not going to debrief because we find that breakout debriefing is often a rehashing of things that already happened. So I hope you got some good insights from your activity. And now we're going to move into activity 2 and take a look at what students think about data and privacy, specifically based on this 2021 Kaplan survey of a little over 2,000 undergrads from colleges and universities in the US. Now I can't remember if this one was international or just US. Does anybody remember?
I believe it was US.
I think it was US.
But we can all click and
right.
check Jennifer's work.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so question number 1, and Lisa, you're going to run polls for us, right?
Yeah.
Right. What percentage of students think their college collects data about time spent on coursework while using learning platforms? Remember, you're trying to think like the college students here, not what you think. We'll wait till we get at least 90% participation. All right. 100%, 100%. I think if you end the poll, you can share it, Lisa. So 23% got the most answers. The survey said 50% of students thought that their colleges collected this kind of data. You can see there are a few other, are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I lost the magic green outline for some reason. So 50% thought that colleges collected their learning data. What percentage of students are aware of their college privacy policy and have read it?
So I love that I get to watch the answers come in because they are pessimistic. Holy cow.
Ready? 12%. Higher than I would have guessed, to be frank. So I think 5% got the most votes. Someone 30%. There's the optimist in the bunch there. The faithful. Question 3. What percentage of students think it's very important that college has a privacy policy?
Interesting.
Ooh, even splits.
Wow.
And the answer is 40%. I think it's very important that the college has a policy. Good for the students, right? Question 4. What percentage of students think it's very acceptable for college to track location on campus while individuals are connected to campus Wi-Fi? This is just collect, right? So not saying anything about what they think is done with it. Ooh, not a lot of consensus on that one. 5% roughly thought it was okay to be tracking. I thought this was interesting, the biometrics has a slightly different distribution. And I kind of wonder about the utilitarian emphasis here, because it said for access to campus facilities, which gives it a purpose, right? Whereas the other two didn't have a stated purpose. That was interesting. And 5. What percentage of students think they have the ability to set permissions for the data their college collects about them? 22%. All right. We had
Nailed it.
right and wrong answers in that one. All right. So in summary, I don't know, this is in summary, I don't know if it's actually a final conclusion, but we know we collect a lot of data. We know students' opinions are also changing really fast. There was a comparative EDUCAUSE study, I think 2018 to 2020, that showed like some substantive changes in attitudes. So I suspect that will continue to reshape. All right, making privacy soup. Kudos to Lisa for the food acronym here. All right, do you want me to share the mural, Kate, or do you want to take over?
Yeah, so what we can actually do here, I'm gonna paste a link into the document here, but if you're already in Mural, what I can actually do is I should be able to summon you to this area. Now let's see if I can do that. So I should summon everybody to the area here. And what we're going to do, if you're familiar with SOAR, if you're familiar with SWOT, we have a ASU proprietary version here. Alecia McIntyre has already trademarked it. So, no copy and pasting, no right clicking here. She's going to convert it into an NFT. So Lisa, talk to us just very briefly about what you were thinking behind these 4 items. What are we trying to capture here?
So we are trying to capture, so from our training the trainer, we were really motivated to get some collective engagement around what is the culture of privacy that we would like to see ASU have. So today we started planting a seed in terms of how you think about your own data. And I know in our group, we had some discussions about what we already know happens versus what we wish happened, and kind of the conflict of how do you put that genie back in the bottle. So if we could imagine a future state, what would that look like? What would be the strengths? What is ASU already doing well in terms of meeting our ideal state of student privacy? What are opportunities for us to improve upon the work that we're doing? What do we think the ultimate goal of a student privacy culture at ASU should include? And what would be the results of that? What might come from it? So looks like folks are already in there. We're familiar with this kind of process. So we'll let you take it from there and see what the group comes up with.
Yeah, and just like it says here, you should just simply be able to double click and a sticky note should pop up. The text inside of it will resize itself. And so I see somebody is right clicking. I think that might be Jennifer. Wow, you can go ham on the right click. You can change the color. You can do all kinds of cool stuff. But we would really love to understand from you what your ideas are, what your goals are, what you aspire to, would like to see in this space. So because that can help us all generate a future that we want to live in.
Now I got to get really close to my screen. So apologies for that.
And great point, Jennifer. In the bottom right-hand corner, you should have a zoom button. See that down there in the bottom right? Yep.
Yep. Okay. Even that is there. would like to see data over the long run on how, at least in the SOAR model, where do people tend to gravitate? Just noticing opportunities are ahead. Can I ask for clarification on student privacy control panel? Only if you're willing to own that. Are you thinking about something technological or a group of people?
So I will say that that is mine, and
Oh,
what
okay.
I envision is a technology panel that students can get to off of my ASU, where they can say, contact me about this, don't contact me about this.
Yeah,
Use my data for this, don't use my data for that.
that's helpful. I just wasn't panel, I was picturing kind of like,
Oh,
you
well,
know,
that's a great point. Maybe we should also have a student.
we should also have a student panel. We did that at the data conference 3 years ago, I think, maybe 2. There was a very interesting student panel, and they talked about privacy and sort of use of data. It was really interesting. All right. Technically, I believe we are at the end of our time together. I really appreciate everybody engaging. I look forward to working with all of you in the months and years ahead on making sure that privacy becomes a central and integral part of the ASU culture. If there's something specific that you want to do and it's not part of your nominal role and you want to reach out to any of us, please do that, and we'll find a way to get you connected to the work. Thanks for coming. Feel free to keep sticky noting. We'll capture this later if you want to. If you've got lots of thoughts and you want to stay in there for the next hour, we'd be happy to have you co-design with us in that way. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye.